First and foremost, I'll take a step back and reflect on the fact that we've heard a lot of things that are happening, lots of rhetoric in the media about like, budget cuts and so forth. Some of it true, some of it a little bit blown out of proportion. But I will say that this is also something that happens in every administration. So every new administration, there's shifts in federal funding, and so we just have to kind of be ahead of that. But what I'll also reflect on is when we look at the America First agendas, these are some of the key bullet points that are part of that agenda. But ultimately, we're looking at things like border protection, energy dominance, bringing back American values. And so we want to think about what all of these things mean as it relates to building a successful application. So a couple of those things is first and foremost DEI. So this is something that I think has been pretty well publicized at this point, but previously in the Biden administration, policies around DEI, Justice 40, were baked into actual grant applications and were requirements for seeking federal funding. So these are things that we know for sure are being pulled back. They've already been pulled back in a number of different agencies, including the Department of Energy and NIH. And so we want to make sure that, again, as we're building these types of proposals, we're rethinking that as a strategy and so forth. International aid and global programs is another one that we're seeing a lot of pullback on. And so again, like it's something that I think we want to make sure that we're thinking of as we're seeking different federal funds that are available and understanding what agencies will be most closely aligned with potential increases in budgets rather than decreases. And the last, within arts, culture, and humanities, this is another one that we just see a very large pullback. So specifically within DEI initiatives, we actually have some materials that we can share with everybody, where there are what I would call buzzwords that are actually being flagged within grant proposals and other proposals where we want to make sure that we're potentially avoiding these. We built a platform, as I mentioned. We have made the call not to just remove any of these and participate in any sort of censorship, but we will provide you with material that just lets you know these are ones that we know for sure are potentially getting flagged. Um, but another thing that we want to just kind of focus in on here are just like the different funding streams that we're looking at. And again, like focusing more on like the science and what you're actually building, and starting to remove anything that's specifically focused on DEI. So this would be, like things like disparities or injustices and things like that. While that might still be core to your mission, which is incredible, um, adding those into your grant application may actually put you at a disadvantage. Again, some other things that where we're seeing a lots of budget cuts are specifically tied to university systems that have been targeted by the new administration. So again, a lot of these pullbacks, especially these wide pullbacks, especially with Columbia, are ones that were specifically because they're coming in from these academic institutions, not so much because the administration was necessarily looking to cut funding for those specific agenda items. These here are some of the agencies that we know for sure are going to see lots of budget cuts and already have. So USAID, I think, has been pretty well publicized. EPA has been fairly well publicized, but there are lots of others as well. So FEMA, Department of Education, NOAA, and so forth. These are all ones that we know are going to have some pretty major pullbacks. Um, by the way, I always mention at this point that I'm starting with the negative things first. We'll come back to the positive. So here's the positive side of things. So while a lot of these different agencies have seen a lot of pullbacks, we do see a number of agencies as well with actual increases in budget. And by the way, this is also something that is key to the Trump administration, as well as things like the Small Business Innovation Research grant opportunities, the SBIR programs. These are actually core to the Trump administration, and they've already started baking in policies to increase the dollar amounts that are being funded into those spaces. So on the left, you can see here some of the things that in particular are agenda items that are key to this administration. And so we're mentioning all of this because tailoring or potentially tailoring your grant application more in line with these agencies or with these agenda items is a really smart move. And again, something that may ultimately allow you to accelerate your own roadmap and moving into different areas, like if it's rural health, for instance, or into like commercial space. These three agencies are ones that we see a fair amount of volatility. Why? Because there's both increases and decreases across these. So NSF has had lots of different pullback. NIH has had lots of different pullback. But what we saw mostly within NIH is that a lot of that pullback was sort of almost immediately turned back around and opened back up again after removing lots of the DEI initiatives. Within Department of Energy, same thing. Like there's been lots of increases that we've seen on things like nuclear, but some of the things like carbon capture, for instance, are likely to start seeing lots of pullback on funding opportunities. So maybe some of the less obvious things would be like electric vehicles. Lots of people thinking that Trump and Musk are very tied together. Musk, of course, being the owner of Tesla, and electric vehicles would be key to the administration for that reason. But we actually think that's incorrect because Tesla is much further along than other car manufacturers. So we actually don't think that electric vehicles will see a lot of love from this administration. But where we are seeing a huge increase in spend within the actual state agencies, like California Energy Commission, for instance, who's investing lots of different funds into zero emission vehicles, because this is just a trend we've seen in multiple administrations where as funding gets cut at the federal level, it increases within the states. And again, you can see California here, NYSERDA, which is New York. So they take advantage of the fact that those funds are cut at the federal level, and they want to make sure that they're bringing those programs and those technologies and those innovations to the state. So this is really what we think is like on the practical implication side of things is we need to be thinking diversity of funding. So if every year you've been targeting the NIH and looking at the same funds over and over and over again, you may want to start considering that like biomedical is actually very interesting to the Department of Defense and many of the agencies underneath it. Would be also very interesting to look at the different state agencies as well. And so um, finding a solution like a scout that can help you to match against these different opportunities and the different agencies that you might not be looking
Okay.
for
Okay, you
could
ready?
be a really smart move.
Okay, wait,
I'm
wait,
sorry.
wait. Woo! Did you get the skirt?
So I think then reframing and repackaging DEI is another one that we want to be really mindful of again, and we can share much deeper like practical implications of this. The last is really scrutiny on budgets. So if you're going after STTR funding, you're partnering with academic centers. This is something where we want to be really careful because we know that indirect costs are going to be something that gets largely targeted within the SBIR STTR programs. And so we need to make sure that the way that you're spending is in line again with the initiatives of this Trump administration. So again, we talked about this one already, but we've already seen a massive amount of like increases in state opportunities. So I think we're looking at NYSERDA and California Energy Commission here, and you can see lots of things within solar, lots of things within electric vehicles. These are all things that are really starting to increase. So again, really smart move to be focused on some of these opportunities, nonprofit opportunities, local governments even. There's so much funding in these different spaces, and so it's not just sitting within the federal coffers. So these are some trends. These are a little bit old. I know it's the past week. This is about a month old. But you can see here some of these federal grants. So funding that was opened was 29 new opportunities, but closing 68, and opening 850 million, but closing over 1.5 billion. So lots of different like decreases in federal spend across the board there. But again, when you look at the comparison within the state opportunities, 39 grants opening versus closing 15, opening 230 million while only closing 17 million. So you can start to see this is really a pattern kind of across these different buckets of opportunities that are available. So I think it's something that is really important to pay attention to. So again, last thing I'll just double click to again here is within grant funding in general actually does support the Trump administration. So while there's been some decreases at the federal level, while there's been a lot of volatility at the federal level, ultimately, this is something that is key to this administration because it's talking about building new technology within the United States, the critical technology that makes the United States competitive on the global landscape, and ultimately is then fueling the American economy, which is all aligned with this administration. So we know that this is something that is key to Trump's success and frankly any administration's success. But there's always volatility in the beginning stages, and this is why, at this point in time, it's really important for all companies to be cognizant of, you know, what these different shifts are, understanding where there's different opportunities available to them, and partnering with folks who can help them kind of navigate this sort of turbulent landscape. So if you've gone at it doing it the DIY approach in the past, I would recommend working with people who are experts in the space. Of course, we would love to work with you, but I would recommend this to anybody really, because it will just get harder and harder for you to find these opportunities and understand which opportunities are going to be most closely aligned with what you're doing and ensuring that you have the right strategy as you're actually seeking these funds. So again, just a quick blurb on our platform. So we help you through the grant matching side of things, the actual writing side, and then at the completion of all of this, we'll be helping you with like the submission as well as the actual like administration of a grant after you get the award. So we in general can get you through this process in minutes or hours versus potentially taking up to 200 hours to write a single application. So we're offering this to everybody who's on the call today. If you want to just even be looking for new grants that are available to you, you can join Scout. It's free. We'll find you the grant matching opportunities that are great for your business, and offering all of that to you for free. And so that's really it. But I wanted to make sure we got through some of that content and we could spend some time in Q&A and answer any questions that you all might have.
Guys, feel free to just jump in, call out your questions if you have any for Tim, and we'll get it answered.
Yes, please. Oh, sure. So for-profits are eligible for grant opportunities. That's actually a common mistake, is that a lot of people think that grants are only available to nonprofits. There are some that will only be available to nonprofits, but the vast majority of the people we work with are actually for-profit entities. As long as you're building within high-tech infrastructure, SBIR is actually specifically looking for things that can ultimately commercialize. So the phase one SBIRs are looking for you developing a proof of concept and developing your technology and so forth. But the phase twos, which are the larger dollar amounts, those are actually looking for you to commercialize it. So they want to understand your business model. They want to make sure that if they're providing you with the funds, that it's something that you can ultimately sustain for the long haul. So completely open to for-profit entities as well. You can, absolutely. So we've had companies that were just incorporating and getting started, so they had even less traction. So especially again, phase ones, which range in price depending on which agency you're going after, but roughly $250,000 to $300,000. Those are funding the initial pilots. So that's really, so you're pitching, this is what we would like to do. You're going after that grant funding opportunity, and then what they want is that you can actually like build that proof of concept and prove that you were able to use those funds to build it. So yes, absolutely. So again, like for anybody who's on the call today, I mean, you can just put in some information about your company and what you're building. It will automatically match you with the opportunities that fit. So it will show you all the SBIRs from the different agencies that would be interested in what you're building. So a lot of times they're like these funds are available to both or to either, I should say. So when you look at the eligibility requirements within a specific grant, it will tell you who's eligible. Are they for profit? Are they nonprofit? But there are tons of for-profit opportunities out there. Occasionally, they will also be earmarked to only academic groups. So that's the other thing to look for. And so that's why this becomes actually a very difficult process sometimes for people to navigate on their own, because you really need to dig into the details on eligibility requirements and so forth to understand whether or not you would actually fit. So that's why we built the platform that we did, because we realized that it's just so difficult. So I can actually show you what some of this looks like live, but we realized because it's so difficult for people to navigate, it's just, almost overwhelming for them to be handling. So again, here we have just a fake company, which is it's a maternity company that we use as a demo. And you can see in here all of the different funding opportunities that are available. This is a for-profit entity. Of course, there's some at NIH, but also Wisconsin Department of Health and so forth. So lots of different funding opportunities that are available. And when you click into any of these, you'll start to see a little bit more information on the actual application process, the description of these different things, but you'll also see, most crucially, this eligibility requirement as well, to see who's actually capable of applying for these types of things. So we provide all of that information to you so that we're giving you the tools in your tool belt to find the right ones for you. So you can reach out to the program officer at DOE to find out what's going on there. They have had delays. So some of these delays, by the way, they're caused by the new administration change, of course. Some of them are also because there are lots of advances in generative AI, right? So lots of people now who hadn't previously applied are now going into things like ChatGPT and creating a bunch of grant proposals and creating a lot of noise. So what we've prided ourselves in is that the platform we've built is leveraging AI to build high quality proposals versus um, building a bunch of like outlines and bullet points that will ultimately get rejected. But the agencies are getting flooded with lots of inbound requests. So basically across the board, all of the agencies have been delayed in getting back to people. But DOE in particular is one that has also been delayed because they previously did have requirements on DEI. And so my suspicion is that they're coming through each one of those things individually to align those applications with the new administration. Yeah, so I still think that NSF is a really great program, really for anybody to be applying for. So they pride themselves in being America's seed fund. So again, if you think sort of about the venture side of JD Vance, and then also Trump's, quite the entrepreneur himself. So this is really going to be fueling lots of U.S. based companies, and so I assume that you're applying for a phase one SBIR with them.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah. So we see that program continuing to advance and potentially even getting more funding. There are. So lots of times what will happen is they'll do a notice of intent for funding. So within the CDMRP in particular, I think only half of them are available for applications today. But they did receive, I think it's 650 million more in funding in this cycle. So the funds are there, and then they may still be taking in. Um, uh, they sometimes open up for like questions, or you could potentially even be pseudo lobbying to get some of those opportunities more aligned with what you're building. So that's the nice thing with those pre-announcements, is that first of all, we'll let you know that it's coming up and you can start to prepare for it. But on top of that, oftentimes you can actually speak to the program officer, pitch them with what you're building, and potentially see if like there's interest there. So it's a really good strategy for not necessarily just applying out of the gate, but you can actually see if those program officers are aligned with what you're building too. So that's why, I mean, I think about half of them are open right now. The other half are in pre-announcements right now. Yes, that's what we would recommend. You can reach out and see what may be going on there, and when it might be opening up. So ARPA-H is another one that went through a similar process where they were about to release some programs, they paused things and then reopened them later, but the dates get confusing because the original dates may shift, and they may not be even updating websites to inform you of that. we actually pull in the PDFs for everything, and we can actually link off to if you see here, this is actually from HRSA. So this is the actual solicitation. We pull them into our database and parse them out. And that's how we understand all of this additional information and context on it as well. And that's actually what's fueling the matching. So you would actually upload some material on your business. We do something similar where we kind of like extract out to understand exactly what you're building in your research, and then just do the same thing on the solicitation to facilitate that matchmaking. Any other questions at all? Amazing. Well, thank you all for taking the time. I mean, please feel free to reach out to myself or to anybody on the team, but we appreciate you taking the time, and yeah, excited to help find you all funding.
Thanks, team.